the original custodians of these lands. The people of the rivers and the hills have walked these lands for thousands of years as well as today, and we pay respect to the elders of the past, present and emerging. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Are there any apologies or leave of absence? No. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No. I understand that we have someone who would like to introduce a late item of business. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yes, I'd like to move a motion if it could be heard and determined at around 15.15 of the agenda. But it's that the council adopts the following statement in unequivocal commitment to diversity, inclusion and the right of the LGBTIQA+ communities across the Indigo Shire. And two, the council advocates for a strong strategic commitment to supporting the LGBTIQA+ community.
So at this point, the motion isn't about the substance of that. It's about accepting it as a late item of business into the agenda. So what we're voting on at the moment is to admit it as an item to be read before item 15 on the agenda. So do we need somebody to move and second that? So Councillor Goldsworthy, you've moved that. Councillor Shepherd, you're happy to second. Or we'll just put it straight to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to item 5, which is open forum. We have one set of questions from Leonie Williams. Just check in, Leonie Williams, you're in the gallery. I'll read those questions out. Our view of the Planning Department's report on this application clearly shows a negative bias outlook to enhance the recommendation of refusal. What is Council's outlook and response to ensure that the Planning Department provide a more balanced view of the policy details being reported on? CEO, are those questions to the Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton?
Yep, thank you for the question. So the planning team assesses planning applications without fear or favour against the planning scheme, and they make recommendations based on whether the application is an appropriate use of land. In this case, the application doesn't meet the planning scheme requirements, and that's what the report says.
Question 2. This application sets a best case example of its type and an opportunity of precedence for limited development within the settlement area of Stanley. With this application in mind, what is Council's future plans for Stanley in regards to planning a sustainable growth of the settlement area of Stanley? Director Pinkerton.
Yeah, thank you. Development in Stanley, there's some significant hurdles for development in Stanley. It's an unsewered area that's bushfire prone, and it also has some of the Shire's best farming land. But there's work on 2 fronts. The first one is that there's some work to rezone a small part in the centre that would allow some expanded land uses. This work was well underway, but it stalled after the Bushfire Royal Commission. We've still been working on that, and there's still hope that we would find a township zone in the future. That's work that's underway. The second piece of work, which impacts Stanley but the whole Shire, is that we're looking at a Shire-wide housing strategy. Normally we've done these township by township. The point of doing it Shire-wide is that instead of looking at each township and each location for growth, the new philosophy in planning is that there may be some areas, perhaps like Stanley, that might not be suited to further residential development. And there might be other parts of the Shire where small blocks and housing is more appropriate. And again, that work is underway.
The third question, there has been minimal information provided to us with our application in regards to the proceeds to the decision being handed down. Would Council please advise us what options there may be when we consider the outcome of the decision? Director Pinkerton.
Thank you. I wasn't too sure on this, but as far as options for the planning and after tonight, whichever way that goes, council doesn't normally advise applicants on that. I note you've got a very experienced planning consultant, and that's the conversation you would normally have with her. But if you want, I'm happy to help with that, but I'd take that offline and we can do that separately. That question doesn't relate to tonight's decision. That's more after that. Yep.
Thank you. That concludes open forum. Move now to item 6, community and council achievements. Are there any community and council achievements? Councillor Horn.
I wish to recognise a very significant milestone for the Rotary Club of Rutherglen, which has been running the annual June long weekend country fair since 2002. During this time, they've donated to all 3 schools and kindergarten in Rutherglen, 6 of the sporting clubs, including the golf, bowling, hockey, rowing, tennis, swimming and football clubs, Barclay Park and also Marnawatha Park Reserve, Glenview, the Little Athletics Group, also the Play Group, the Scouts, the SES, the CFA and Rotary youth programs have also benefited from this money. I think sometimes we underestimate the value of the contributions our service clubs deliver to our communities. And I would particularly like to thank Joe and Bill Slattery on this instance, and the members of the Rotary Club of Rutherglen for their efforts in distributing the massive amount of $400,000 over the last 11 years. It's a mighty, mighty effort.
Move now to item 7, condolences. I understand that Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Croucher, you'd like to do a condolence, and Councillor Horn, you've got one as well. Councillor Shepherd.
On Tuesday, 20th of June, Yakandanda farewelled Pam Crosswaite, a much loved member of the local community. The Yakandanda Hall was full to overflowing and her family and friends spoke lovingly of her full life. These words are taken from her eulogy. When Pam McDonald and Donald Crosswaite were first married, they lived in Dedarang, and Pam immediately became involved in the community and commenced her work in her nursing profession as the first district nurse in the Kiewa Valley, and later as the Director of Nursing in Yakandanda. Pam had qualified as a general nurse in 1969 and as a midwifery nurse in 1970. In later years, to better understand and administer to the many aged residents at Yakandanda Bush Nursing Hospital, Pam undertook a degree in gerontology, which she used to great advantage for many years. Pam's role in establishing and expanding nursing and health services in Yakandanda was very significant. When Pam commenced at the health complex, there were 17 residents, and at her retirement, there was accommodation for 85, as well as a medical centre, independent living and a childcare. Pam was Director of Nursing for 16 years and was actively involved in fundraising for the building expansion. Today, we hear the government promising to have a registered nurse 24/7 in each aged care facility. In Pam's day, she often stayed overnight after a day shift at much personal and family costs to ensure that 24/7 care was always available to all residents. Pam epitomised the care in aged care. In June 2009, Pam was awarded an Order of Australia. The citation was for services to nursing and the community of Yakandanda. This was the most appropriate national recognition for her wonderful work, and the announcement of the award was welcomed by the family and community. Pam was an active and committed community member and volunteer for Red Cross, Gundaring Tennis Club, Yakandanda Golf Club, Secretary of the Kiewa Valley School, and many other volunteer roles supporting the community and her family. Pam at one stage led a demonstration down the main street of Yakandanda with several residents when the bank advisor were closing their doors. The bank's still closed, but Pam at least had let them know she wasn't happy. When Pam was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at age 60, as a health professional, she knew exactly what the diagnosis meant. In true selfless fashion, she had the surgery and allowed the TV program, The Project, to film her before, during and after. This provided massive exposure and publicity about Parkinson's disease, and she continued her support through until the end, helping educate future students and support others who had Parkinson's. Pam was direct, expressive, optimistic, outgoing, enthusiastic, inspirational, honest and hardworking. She knew everyone in town and everyone knew her. She was a well-loved and active member of the Yakandan and Kiwa community and will be sadly missed. We send our sympathy to her husband, Donald, children Stuart, Andrew and Sarah, and to the many extended family members and friends. I ask that we send a condolence letter under seal to her husband, Donald Coswaite, and family.
Councillor Crouch, would you like to add to that
Well, how
condolence?
can I follow that? But I would like to endorse Councillor Shepherd's remarks and add to them by recalling Pam's immense involvement in the area in which she lived, which was the Gundaring area. Pam was an active member of the Gundaring Red Cross, and her voluntary work with the local school, which her children attended, Kiwa Valley School, was indeed noted. But it was her willingness to work in her local community whenever the need arose that will always be remembered by our local community. She'll be sadly missed. LA Pam Crosswaite, OAM.
So Councillor Shepherd, you'd like to move a motion that a letter under seal be sent to the family, and Councillor Crouch, you'd like to second that. Okay, so the request from both of you is enough. We won't vote on that. Councillor Horn, you've got a condolence motion as well.
Thank you. Members of the local CFA brigade formed a guard of honour to acknowledge Mrs. Jeanette McIntosh after her untimely passing on the 7th of June. They then filled a hall full of families, friends and others who travelled from right across the region and much further afield to celebrate the life of this greatly admired and highly respected woman who touched many lives. Jeanette was born and educated in Benalla. She studied at La Trobe University for some time, then went on to hold a number of managerial and administrative roles within the Department of Agriculture and various local government and community service organisations. She was heavily involved with both the hockey and cricket clubs, and she enjoyed serving on numerous school councils and committees. Jeanette's passion for volunteering knew no bounds. She put in many hours at the local Visitor Information Centre and also at Glenview as part of Indigo North Health, as well as carrying out her CFA duties. On top of all of this, Jeanette found time to make a very, very valuable contribution to the Rotary Club of Bradley by serving as secretary for the town's very popular country fair, which is held each year on the Sunday of the June long weekend. Amongst the many legacies Jeanette leaves, not only the gratitude of the community, but also the gift of her kindness, her generosity, wit and fighting spirit. Fail Jeanette.
So again, CEO, the request from the councillor is enough to note that a condolence letter will be sent under seal to the family. Thank you. It can be seconded by Councillor Gaffney. It's moved by Councillor Horn, seconded by Councillor Gaffney. Okay, thank you. There are no more condolences. Councillors, at this point, I'd like to ask for a motion to bring an item forward in the agenda, given that we've got interest in the public gallery. So if one of the councillors might like to move that item 11.7 is brought forward in the agenda. Councillor Gaffney, you're happy to move that? Somebody happy to second that? Councillor Tyson, you'll second that. All those in favour that it's brought forward to be dealt with now? Carried. Councillor Crouch, you put your hand up then? Yep, carried unanimously. So I'll just give you a moment to get to that item. Okay, councillors, item 11.7 is planning permit application PP 220008 Lower 9 Mile Road, Stanley. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse a planning permit for the proposal to use and develop the land for a dwelling in on lot 1 on title plan 962100R Lower 9 Mile Road, Stanley on the following grounds. The proposal is not consistent with the following clauses of the planning policy framework, and they're set out A through I. 2, the proposal is not consistent with the purpose and decision guidelines of the farming zone. 3, the proposal is not consistent with the purpose and decision guidelines of the bushfire management overlay. And 4, the proposal is inconsistent with the decision guidelines of clause 65.01. Councillor Tyson, if you just turn on your microphone.
I'd like to move an alternative motion.
Sorry, yes, your alternative motion is for approval.
For approval.
So councillors, we've had that circulated to us.
Would you like me to read out the conditions?
It is 5 pages long, the recommendation for approval.
I'll just take it as read. We'll take it as read.
So councillor Tysell, if you could read the first paragraph and then where it gets to subject to the following conditions, we'll
Okay,
understand that as read by other councillors.
thank you. The council issues a notice of decision to grant a planning permit allowing the use and development of a dwelling on a lot less than 40 hectares, buildings and work within 20 metres of a road, buildings and works within 5 metres of a boundary, buildings and works within 100 metres of a dwelling, not in the same ownership, and buildings and works within 100 metres of a waterway in the farming zone. Construct a building that may carry out works associated with the use of the land for accommodation in the bushfire management overlay. Construct a building and carry out the works in environmental significant overlay, subject to the following conditions as listed.
So there are a number of conditions. They range from item 1 through to item 29. Councillors, you've got them before you to consider. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Crouch, you'd like to second. Councillor Tysell, would you like to speak? Councillor Goldsworthy, you have a question.
Do. It's for the Director of Planning and Finance, Greg Pinkerton. On the Vic Plan map and on Google Maps, there appears to be an easement that runs through the centre of the block in question and potentially directly through the house that's been proposed. Are you able to give any details on that?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Not at this time. I don't have any information at hand to answer that question.
Just a follow-up question. If there is an easement that it appears to be on Vic Plan, would that alter the recommendation that's currently or the motion before council? Would there be a concern that the building would be built on an easement? And what would the implications be?
I'm just looking at a map of the property now. The building would be very close to or on that easement. I can't answer that without further information. I'm sorry.
As a procedural thing, I'd like to defer this matter until the next meeting, until we can get some guidance on that. There appears to be an easement going directly through the block and through the house.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you can't make representation from the gallery. Thank you. Okay, so at the moment we've got an approval motion that's been moved and seconded, and Councillor Goldsworthy, you'd like to move a motion for deferral, noting that it has once had a deferral. CEO, we just need a seconder on that.
I think the council is flagging an alternate motion.
No, it's just a deferral motion.
Yeah, there's currently a motion that's been moved and seconded. So that's the motion before the chamber. So you're flagging an alternate motion.
Can we?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it can be deferred if at this stage until we find out further information. I just said I have concerns that it's going directly through where the house is.
There's a motion before the chamber, it needs to be dealt with first.
Okay, so at the moment, we'll continue to consider the motion for approval as outlined by Councillor Tysell and seconded by Councillor Croucher, with the understanding that Councillor Goldsworthy would like to move a deferral motion if this were to lapse. So Councillor Tysell, you will speak as the mover of the motion now.
As our Director of Planning and Finance aptly said, Stanley is a very valuable water resource to the towns. And as such, planning permits there need to be, I believe, taken very seriously. I believe that the applicant has made all efforts to attend to water runoff and reclamation of water. I note that there are many other similar size lots within Stanley and around Indigo Shire, but I believe that each one should be taken on its merits. Thank you.
Councillor Croucher, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, I really found it difficult in making a judgment on this planning application, and I found myself asking a number of the questions. Is the effluent disposal too close to the creek? Well, Goulburn Murray Water are satisfied with the situation under certain conditions. Is the overall landscape a risk to bushfires, and therefore must human life come into consideration? Well, the CFA say that the available bushfire documents meet technical requirements. What do North East Water say? No objections. Do the minor issues of stormwater runoff, environmental and sustainable design issues, landscaping and revegetation of land cause concern? Well, these are not sufficient reasons to justify a refusal. And then we come to the no residential development in a farming zone unless strictly for agriculture. This lot is much too small for agriculture. Therefore, I've made my decision to endorse the alternate motion.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gaffney?
I feel ill at ease if there's an easement going through this land, particularly through the house, and it certainly puts council at risk. I was going to ask a question of Councillor Teisel, whether he was aware of this easement. So I couldn't vote for it if there's an easement running through the house and putting council at risk.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Look, there are concerns for this block of land being developed. Obviously, they've been outlined within the report. One of them is that it is within a farming zone, and despite what Councillor Croucher said, small lots of land can be used for farming purposes, and this would certainly take it out of there. But my primary concern is that, and I've only just had a look because when you look at Google Maps of all things, it shows an easement running through it. And I looked up on the Victorian Government website for Vic Plan, and that too shows an easement that goes directly through the block and across where the house would be built. Now, I don't know what sort of easement that is, whether it's some sort of drainage easement or whether it's a potential road, but we've certainly been caught out in the past, and it's taken a lot of work for land deals and land swaps to work out easements in the past. And I don't think we should be one of those councils that approve something when there's a potential for an easement to be an issue. So my recommendation is that we vote against this motion with the foreshadowed motion that this item comes back before council once it is established whether an easement is present or not, and it can be decided then on that issue, whether it's on the other issues and not on the easement. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, that we vote against it and then go to the foreshadowed motion for a deferral.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd or Councillor Horn? No. Councillor Teisel, I'll go back to you to sum up.
Yeah, as per my previous comments, I believe that it on its merits it should be, but I do take Councillor Goldsworthy's comments on board. Thank you.
Okay, so at the moment we've got the motion to approve, and that's what we're voting on at the moment, knowing that there has been a motion for deferral that has been foreshadowed. So I'll put the motion for approval. All those in favour? Those against? So the motion has been lost. So we'll move to the deferral motion. Sorry. So all those that were in favour of that motion, Councillor Croucher, Councillor Teisel, those against were Councillor Gaffney, Price, Goldsworthy, Shepherd, Horn. Motion is lost. So councillor Goldsworthy will go to your deferral motion.
Yes, I move a motion that this item be reconsidered at the next meeting of council. Once the item in question around an easement is clarified.
Do we have someone to second that motion? Seconded councillor Tyson. Councillor Goldsworthy, do you wish to speak to that?
I'll just reiterate what I've already said in relation to it. There appears to be an easement, and that's
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure that a councillor who has put a motion up that's been lost can then second another motion which is contrary to his.
We'll just check that. Councillor Crouch, you've got a question?
Just a question. If that has been lost and the easement one comes through and comes back to the next meeting, can this one be put forward again, the alternate motion, and go through the
Yes. Yep.
procedure again? Thank you.
Director Pinkerton, do you have an answer on that?
The point of order is I don't believe a person who puts up a motion
Yeah. So
can
that's
then
what we're checking.
vote, can then vote against a amendment.
For ease, we could ask for another seconder if that's just an easier way of circumventing that. Director Pinkerton?
Yeah, I think I know the area that you're talking about. If there's a motion and it's moved and seconded, then the mover or the seconder of that motion shouldn't be doing an amendment to their own motion. So I think that's the section you're thinking of. In this case, this is a separate motion. So one motion has been voted on, and this is a separate motion, and there would be no constraints on somebody who took part in the first debate moving a second motion. So I believe that's all above board.
I can't find a reason to say not to it.
Okay. For ease, could we go back to councillor Goldsworthy as the mover, and I'll ask again for a seconder that is not someone who participated in the original motion? Councillor Horn, you're happy to second. So the motion is for deferral. Councillor Goldsworthy, would you like to speak?
Only that there appears to be an easement running through the property, and I would like that clarified before I have the opportunity to vote on the issue.
Councillor Horn, would you like to speak as seconder?
I think it's just a very sensible move to defer it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion for deferral? No. Councillor Goldsworthy, would you like to sum up? I'll put the motion for deferral. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now return to item 8, which is confirmation of minutes from previous meeting. So item 8 is confirmation of minutes from previous meetings. The recommendation is that the following minutes be confirmed. 1, the minutes of the council meeting held on 16 May 2023 as published on council's website. And 2, confidential minutes of the council meeting held on 16 May 2023 as provided to councillors under separate cover. Do I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Gaffney. Councillor Shepherd, do you wish to speak? Councillor Gaffney? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9 is business arriving from the previous minutes. There are nil reports. Item 10, petitions. There are none. Item 11, planning and corporate services. 11.1 is the May finance report for 2023. The item is for information. The recommendation is that council accepts the year-to-date May finance report, noting the progress against council's Q2 forecast. Do I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Gaffney, seconded councillor Croucher. Councillor Gaffney.
I'd like to start with a question for the Director of Finance. On page 11, it talks about interest income and about 88,000 investment income, a favourable variance of 116,000. But the one I'm most interested in is point 2 of 27,000 interest on rates, interest calculated on outstanding rate debtors. I believe that Indigo Shire Council has a hardship policy. So I'm wondering whether the interest calculated on the outstanding rates, is that for the late payment of rates or for the non-payment of rates, and what we do to recover that money, seeing that the state government recently made the use of debt collectors as an issue of last resort.
The Director of Planning and Corporate Services.
Yeah, thank you. So the interest on rates is for rates that haven't been paid for an extended period of time. We've got a bit of discretion that we use if somebody is just a little late. But to your question, the interest that's received is for the longer term debtors. As far as I'm trying to remember the other part, that was about the actions taken to recover. So we have a really active rates department that will approach rates debtors and work with them to put them on payment plans and those sorts of processes that enables them to pay off the rates without having to go down the path of debt collection. This council has not used debt collection in any large way recently. That was a change of the state government who did, as you point out, say that the debt collection should be a matter of last resort. So most of our rates debtors are in regular contact with our rates department and our accounts receivable department, and most are on payment plans paying them off.
Thank you. Going on, it's interesting that the Local Government Act requires councils to report financial information quarterly, and Indigo Shire reports this information monthly. We've only got only 1 month to go for the end of the financial year. At the end of May, our financial position is favourable to forecast.
Councillor Croucher, would you like to speak?
Yeah, the financial position is favourable to the Q2 forecast, and council is working towards the completion of projects and action plans. Expectations are that targets set for the Q2 forecast will be achieved by the end of this month.
Would anybody else like to speak? No, I'll go back to Councillor Gaffney. Would you like to sum up? No, I'll put the motion to accept the May finance report. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.2 is the Council Plan 2021 to 2025 Year 3. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council adopts the Council Plan 2021 to 2025 Year 3, noting adjustments to the phasing and rewording of some actions, and the updated Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Action Plan 2021 to 2025. Do I have someone to move that motion? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I know that this is a requirement of council under the Local Government Act, and that this plan is really a chance for us to review and take on board any new priorities that have been identified by councillors and any challenges and influences which we may not have been able to pick up on an earlier plan. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
I note that we had a submission for this year's, this review. And I'm just interested, one of the questions that were asked, and we have officer comments beside the things that were asked, explaining the reasons for changing changing or not changing the plan, but the digitisation of the planning and building register, I note that that's come up a number of times with different people. And this person name redacted is asking when we are going to do that. And our answer is current legislation makes it very expensive to convert registers to electronic format. And this is not considered to be a project that would match benefit the community. At this stage, council is maintaining the current manual system, but we hope to eventually convert to digital when appropriate. I know that's just something that comes up a bit, and this person has raised it. And I see the officer's comments, but I was just wondering if you're happy to give us a little bit more information about that. Thank you.
Director of Planning and Corporate Services.
Yeah, thank you. It's a bit of a frustration. The legislation is written in a way that if we provide the registers electronically, we need to provide all of the planning information going back at least 25 years. So the reason why it's cost prohibitive, it's not cost prohibitive, it could be done obviously. However, it would require digitising any old paperwork permits, but also taking all of the permits for 25 or 27 years now, redacting the personal information. So each one requires some work to put it online. Now we've asked the question about whether we can just do it from this point onwards, or whether we can do a small amount and then add to it. And the answer is no. If it's going to be online, it needs to be online. So the project is quite large, and then we match that with the register certainly gets people viewing it, but it's only a few people. And so we look at the cost of spending ratepayers' money to do that significant project versus the number of people. And so we maintain the manual process. It's frustrating to all of us because we would like to do something different, but it's fairly difficult to justify that sort of expense when we could put that money to something else.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to thank the submitter. It's great to get submissions around. Often it's just, we just pass it. So the other thing I'm a bit interested in is we've moved developing a public toilets improvement strategy to 23-24 and developing the tree canopy strategy for 23-24. Two areas that I think the community are certainly making a lot of noise about. So hopefully we get that done next in the 23-24 period.
Would anybody else like to speak to that? Councillor Horn.
I'm just curious, Inspector Pinkerton, Director Pinkerton, sorry, not Inspector, why the 25-year time limit?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. That's the time period that Indigo Shire has been in place. I think it's 26 or 27 years now. So that would be our quote unquote permits. There is a bit of a question about whether we would be obligated to go back to the previous councils. So we know it would be at least the tenure of Indigo Shire and perhaps a bit more.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'll go back to you, Councillor Tyson. Would you like to sum up? Okay. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.3 is consideration of the 2023-24 budget submissions. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the attached draft budget responses and thanks submitters for their assistance and feedback. 2, endorses the management responses detailed in this report in relation to the budget submissions. 3, endorses any recommended changes to the budget or actions as a result of the submissions as detailed in the report, noting the addition of $87,000 for footpaths and $70,000 for drainage. And 4, directs council staff to respond to each submitter with a copy of this report and the council resolution. Could I first go to Director Pinkerton, the Director of Corporate Planning and Corporate Services?
Yes, thank you very much. It was brought to our attention that one of the submissions may have not made it in. We're not too sure what has happened, but we're quite happy to take that on face value. And I would like to add one final submission to the suite that we have already in there. Now, this submission was circulated by email to councillors over the weekend, so they've had a chance to read the original copy, and I will table a redacted copy for the records.
Thank you, Director. So I'll just confirm that, yes, we did receive that submission. All councillors have received that. So now I'll ask someone to move that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Gaffney. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Gaffney.
The themes identified from the budget submissions are: 1, consultation effectiveness, core asset maintenance and upgrade roads, bridges, footpaths, flood repair costs, recovering from COVID and fires, council expenditure on cycling, balance on expenditure between different groups, town services or asset types, the rate increase, which I'd like to make further comment about that in the budget discussions, time taken to complete capital works projects, draft document errors, and specific funding requests. On page 29 of the agenda, it goes into large amounts of money that have been spent on those items.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
It's an interesting discussion in this report on how effective this is, having these submissions late in the proceedings when we've sort of already really got the budget tightly toned. We did have the 320 submissions that we had earlier, of course, that we know they all went out to all the heads of departments and offices saying, okay, make sure that you read these and incorporate them into the budget. But at this end of the budget process, we've got, like I just went through and read them. They're interesting, but things like Gorge Bridge work, Yakandanda Cemetery parking, Ford Street roundabout, Chiltern Athenaeum funding, Church Street Bridge, Yakandanda, Barna Wharf parking, pump track tennis court, Kagunya Hall, Beechworth swimming pool, Yakandanda bike pump, Quercus, CCTV. So there were a number of infrastructure items that were discussed by people, which I thought, well, they're interesting. Are they already part of the process? And I see that in the report, it says that, maybe it's the wrong end for people to be putting in these particular items. But I quite like the way that the department's going to look into it. They're going to take those particular items that people have raised, and even though they're not going to get into this budget, they will be discussed again at officer level and departmental level on where they're up to these areas. Some of them I think might have already even been in the works, and whether they can be a part of the next budget. So it's interesting. Is this the way to do it or not? And if you read the report, there is a whole discussion of it. And if I could just say how I thought the report was very well done. I think it really reflected the whole budget process. The submissions gave good comments on the submissions. So I'd just like to thank your department, Mr. Pinkerton, for the great report, and I encourage people to read it.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher?
Just going through the submissions, I just feel that the community needs to know a few things, and I certainly I've learned a lot through this practice as well, that repairs to assets damaged in actual natural disasters are covered by an agreement with the state, and that there's very little contribution from the council. And also that council does not reduce expenditure in other areas to fund cycle tourism. I think a lot of our community get the wrong idea with that. They seem to think that council is responsible for that, and often put in submissions for that sort of thing when they're not really possible. Just a few important points.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn?
I would like to say that I feel that it's writing submissions is not something that a lot of people have experience in. So I think perhaps a lot of the people that filled in responded to the pre-budget surveys wouldn't be inclined to go ahead and put in a submission. So, perhaps we have some sort of educational process that we could use to educate people about what they're what they can and can't respond to and how to do that effectively.
Okay, would anybody else like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Gaffney as the mover.
This budget contains allocations that align with the community feedback to maintain core assets. A lot of these, or even most of these, couldn't be done without the federal assistance grants. But there's 11.4 million for new capital works projects, which includes roads, footpaths, bridges, drains, urban and rural drains, priority gravel roads, priority sealed roads, bridge renewal works, seal urban roads, curb and channel replacement, and upgrading public toilets. I think that reflects that that council takes submissions very seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of this motion? Carried unanimously. And I'd just say from all of us, thank you to everyone that's contributed to any of the consultation to do with the budget, whether it's via the pre-budget survey or the submissions at the late stage. As you can hear, we're constantly rethinking this process and considering how we can make it better and how it can be more useful in getting your feedback. So thank you. Item 11.4 is approval to borrow. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just have a motion that's slightly different to the one that's recommended to us. Happy to read it out.
Yes, please, Councillor Goldsworthy.
That council approves borrowings of $1 million to be taken up using the following process. Borrowings to be procured at a time that council's cash at bank is projected to fall below $6 million within the following 2 months. Borrowing institutions and interest rate to be decided by the CEO based on 3 quotes. This resolution is valid to the end of the 2026-27 financial year.
Okay, councillors, you've been provided with a copy of that. Just making sure everyone's got a copy to have a look at. So Councillor Goldsworthy, that is now the motion and you're the mover, and we'll get a seconder, which is Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy, you can speak to your motion.
It's important that council have money available to fund its operations. We made the decision last financial year to, the current financial year, to purchase land at Chiltern, and that incurred a debt of roughly $1 million for the council. We need to ensure that money in the future is available if called upon. I believe that there is little point in borrowing the money until it is required, because that will only incur interest payments that could otherwise be used for council activities in the future. So the process by which the loan would be undertaken will actually save council money that could be reinvested into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak?
I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's more agile, and we're not paying interest rates when we don't need that money. So, yep, support that.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Goldsworthy if you'd like to sum up. So I'll read the motion once again, just for all of the benefit of all the councillors. The motion is that council approves borrowings of $1 million to be taken up using the following process. 1, borrowings to be procured at a time that council's cash at bank is projected to fall below $6 million within the following 2 months. And 2, borrowing institution and interest rate to be decided by the CEO based on 3 quotes. 3, this resolution is valid to the end of the 2026-27 financial year. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.5 is the adoption of the Indigo Shire Council 2023-24 budget. It is a 2-page recommendation. So I will just take it that councillors have that in front of them now. We've had a number of sessions on this budget. Sorry, Councillor Horn is. So at this point, I'll ask someone to move the budget. Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Tysell. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Well, this budget's about $42 million worth of spend for the Indigo Shire. It's got a $19.9 million capital works program. It will deliver on a lot of what the community asked for in the council plan. As was pointed out, the submissions that have been made have influenced the budget. It's roughly $2 million that will be spent on our roads over the coming budget. There's lots of community facilities that will be enhanced during this time. There's no new borrowings, and all going well, the cash at the end will still be very healthy. So with a rate increase of 3.5%, the total income of $19.7 million from rates, it still only represents about 45 or 48% of our overall income. It's a total expenses of $38 million. My apologies, and I think the income is about 42.
Councillor Tysell, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thank you. I'd just like to read an extract out of the Chiltern Grapevine, just a few of the projects that have, and some of the money that's been spent in the budget. Included in the budget in this program is $2.7 million to maintain roads, bridges, footpaths and drains, 1.2 to reseal priority rural roads and resheet gravel roads, $700,000 to improve urban and rural drainage, $529,000 for bridge renewal and improvement works, and $350,000 to upgrade the female change rooms at Barclay Park. In supporting the budget tonight, I'd like to thank Greg Pinkerton and Sharon Phillips for the hard work and long hours that they've done to bring this to council. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Gaffney.
The budget says that the increase in rates is as per the state government rate cap of 3.5%. As we've seen recently, Wodonga increased their rates to 2% and Wangaratta to 2.9%. And a number of people in the community have said, why can't we follow suit? Why do we have to go to 3.5%? I'd just like to ask the Director of Finance if you could do a comparison apples for apples about the amount of rates on properties in Wodonga, Wangaratta and Indigo, and how that rate is different.
The Director of Planning and Corporate Services.
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the key things that we look at early on in the piece, we as in staff when we're preparing the budget, but I know councillors look at the first budget workshop, is rate affordability. That's an important part of considering the budget for the community. When we do that analysis, there's a number of different ways that you can look at that. Indigo Shire is always one of the lower rating shires in northeast Victoria by most measures, and even across all of Victoria, we're certainly in the lower rating shires. So that was one of the decision points to accept the state government set rate cap at 3.5. Unfortunately, it was difficult to go lower, particularly in this year. Up to the end of December, inflation was running at 7.9%. Even the March quarter was still at 7%. So it's been a challenging year, as I think it says in the report, of trying to meet an inflation that is running at double the rate cap. But as you can see, we've worked with councillors and the community and brought it in to achieve the the cash target and still sticking to that rate cap.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you for that. So even though we're 3.5%, we're still a much lower rating council than our surrounding councils. Just a bit of a typo in the actual budget papers. In the hard copy, it's on page 40. It talks about footpaths and cycle paths. It says footpath upgrade program, then just says the word drive project completion. And it's over $100,000. What that should read is Tratton Street, Waggunya, between Blanche Street and Morley Drive. That's a footpath upgrade.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. CEO, can that just be noted, or does that need to be incorporated in some way?
Madam Chair, I think that's a minor typo that will just fix in the final documents without need for resolution.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to the budget? Councillor Horn.
We've actually come a long way since that day in my previous term on council, when I was genuinely shocked to find that the community involvement was second from bottom on the list of the Shire's stated values. Fortunately, my persistence in pursuing this topic at that time paid off, and I'm very, very proud to say that community involvement remains in its correct position in the #1 spot as our most important value, even ahead of leadership. Our pre-budget survey process that was introduced last year was a massive step forward in giving ratepayers a say in how and where they want their money spent. Sincere thanks to all those who take the time to complete these surveys, as it is not just a box-ticking exercise. Respondents are diligent in using this opportunity to detail their frank and open opinions. Not surprisingly, the need for improved drainage featured strongly in the 315 responses received this year. And although I failed to tabulate the 2020 responses, it was pretty much a carbon copy of the previous year's summary, with strong and consistent messaging for the need to return to the basics. I struggled to find the correlation between what people were looking for and what this proposed budget will deliver. We cannot dismiss the fact that the number of people actively involving themselves in our governance has skyrocketed. As an example, we have traditionally received 3, maybe 4 submissions to the budget, yet this year, that number has risen to 32. We need to account for the focus on tourism when the fundamental needs of those who are still here when all the visitors have gone home are being at best delayed or at worst ignored in favour of big ticket infrastructure items. Additionally, I have severe reservation about this organisation's capacity to effectively deliver projects conceived before we have addressed the ongoing and inevitable consequential impact of fires, floods, COVID, and the worsening economic conditions. In my opinion, we should not support this budget because it simply does not reflect the will of the people. We have the tools, we need the might to break away from this. You'll get what you are given in response to community needs because it is no longer acceptable.
Councillor Horn, I'd remind you that you're one of the 7 decision makers here tonight. So is there any change that you'll be suggesting to be made to the budget, or is it just comments to the budget discussion? So you have a suggestion, you'll make a change to the budget?
No, I won't be making a change to the budget.
Okay. Councillor Crouch, you'd like to speak.
Yes, I'd like to say that the 23-24 budget has been through a definite process, resulting in a report that this budget be adopted. The process, I believe, involves appropriate statutory and consultative procedures allowing for its adoption. I would like to congratulate and thank our financiers for their hard work to achieve the council's objectives in this 23-24 financial year.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak?
The amount of work we do as councillors and as staff around setting that council plan and then setting the budget, I think is massive. And the community, we take the community along all the way, and to then go forward now with a budget set and a council plan set, it really gives us the structure and plan to move forward with deliberation and with a lot of sort of big thinking that's happened behind it. So I just really feel comfortable moving forward into the next sort of year, the next financial year, having a good budget that's been really looked at by all of us and by our staff and by the community, and to have the council plan all set to go as well for this next year. So yeah, a good framework for us to work within.
I'd just like to make comments before I go back to the mover, to say we all live in these communities. We all appreciate the need to go back to basics, as has been referred to. We're all driving on these roads and understanding the issues with drainage, as do our staff, who predominantly have interest in this community as well, and reflect those interests throughout the budget process themselves. I'd also like to thank the CEO and the organisation for the willingness to continue to expand this budget process, because year on year it continues to expand, and the willingness to listen to the councillors in terms of what needs to change and how we can continuously improve this process, I think is something that I'm really pleased that we have in place. To the community that still feel dissatisfied with some of the budget decisions that we've made, that weighs heavily on us. We continue to consider items that you're raising and suggestions that you make outside of this process and as the year continues on. But overall, I'm very satisfied that this is a good budget, and in this climate where councils are talking about their long-term financial sustainability and balancing the needs, the aspirations of the community with their basic needs, I think we've struck the right balance. Now I'll go back to Councillor Goldsworthy as the mover.
I'd like to reiterate some of the congratulations that have been levelled at their staff. I think Sharon Phillips in particular has done a sterling job, given the pressure that's been on her, the lack of a chief financial officer, and under the tutelage and direction of Greg Pinkerton and the CEO. In response to those that think council should focus on roads, rates and rubbish as priorities, I'd like to say that councils in general deliver some 80 odd services across the board. As soon as you leave your house, generally you're involving yourself in council in some way. As a general heading, I'll just point out we do arts and culture, business services, cleaning and waste, community development, emergency management, the environment, equity and diversity, family and children, health and safety, local laws and permits, parks and gardens, pets and animals, planning and building, roads and transport, sport and recreation, and youth services. There is a lot more to council than what people want us to believe. With $2 million being spent on our roads, $700,000 on drainage, and lots of money on our footpaths across the services, I think people should take a close look at what council can deliver and what we do deliver. And on a very tight budget, I think the CEO, you can thank your staff for the excellent job that they do.
So I'll now put the motion that we adopt the Indigo Shire Council 2023-24 budget. All those in favour? Those against? So all those in favour is Councillor Croucher, Tysell, Gaffney, Price, Goldsworthy, Shepherd, and against is Councillor Horn. The motion is carried. Now move to item 11.6, planning permit application PP 220075, 303 Sanatorium Road, Allens Flat. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse a planning permit for the proposal to use and develop the land for a dwelling in on CA 17 section L. Is that L? Sorry, can someone just written over that? In in TP 351328 off Johnson Lane, Allen's Flat on the following grounds. 1, the proposal is not consistent with the following clauses of the planning policy framework. They are to do with settlement, environmental risks and amenity, natural resource management, settlement protection of agricultural land, rural residential land. 2, the proposal is not consistent with the purpose and decision guidelines of the farming zone. And 3, the proposal is inconsistent with the decision guidelines of clause 65.01, including A, the matters set out in section 60 of the Act, and B, the municipal planning strategy and the planning policy framework. C, the purpose of the zone, overlay or other provision. D, any matter required to be considered in the zone, overlay or other provision. And E, the orderly planning of the area. Do I have someone to move that recommendation for refusal? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Croucher. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate one, this because there is actually enough land there for the permit to be issued, but it would involve some consolidation of the properties. There's been a lack of communication from this particular client, and yeah, for those reasons, I'm sorry, we can't approve the permit.
Councillor Croucher.
Yes, having visited the site, the decision, beautiful site, beautiful area, the decision to build a dwelling on a 5.1 hectare lot in a farming zone is certainly not consistent with the guidelines. However, if the overall holding of 9 lots were to subdivide into 2 lots of 40 hectares, no permit for the dwelling would be needed. So at this particular stage, the application must be refused.
Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Tyson, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you. As I said first.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour of voting to refuse the application, carried unanimously. We've dealt with item 11.7 on the agenda, so we move to item 12.1, the Chiltern Destination Play Space Concept Design Report final draft. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council adopts the Chiltern Destination Play Space Concept Design Report. Do I have someone to move that motion? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Tyson.
This has been going now for a little while with council. It's been out for public consultation and has been exceptionally well received within the local Chiltern community. If it was to go ahead, it would be a fantastic opportunity for the whole of Indigo Shire, as it would really be a destination as it is in the plan. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, do you wish to speak as seconder or reserve your right? You reserve your right. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Gaffney.
This project, I'm not 100% certain about it, particularly when you look at the key features of the draft concept designs, which includes, and perhaps Councillor Tyson could enlighten me about how the year-round recreational pool and thermal hot pools. So they're going to be available 24/7, 365 days a year. Is that possible for the community to be using it? And what security would you have in store for them?
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. As you may be aware, there are many thermal springs located throughout Victoria that operate 365 days a year. And as for security, I'm surely we would have cameras up, and potentially we may even have security depending on the usage.
One more question, Madam Mayor. Is there a thermal spring in that park where this is going to be established?
I don't have that information.
Councillor Gaffney, have you finished speaking to the motion?
Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher.
Yes, I'm not completely convinced that the concept is for Chiltern and its community. The 54 submissions did show 35 support to this project, but there were 19 who were either opposed or not too sure. However, I do believe that Chiltern does deserve the opportunity to have a play space area that will draw new visitors to explore their town, not only the new play space, but historic Chiltern as a whole.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to say this project has been something that's been in the works for quite some time. A destination playground is a significant item within itself. When there was appetite from Regional Development Victoria to consider how we might integrate the pool because it sits within that footprint, our staff turned their mind to that. We're constantly giving thought to what we do with our pools, as are all the other local governments across Australia. It's a problem for federal and state governments, and I think it's really important that we approach our response to how we're going to keep pools in our small towns in a really dynamic sort of a way. So when we go to the state, when we go to Regional Development Victoria and their appetite is strong for a project like this to be fully fleshed out as something that could be a way that, as I say, we maintain our pools in our small towns, we were able to incorporate it into the destination play space. It then made sense to completely master plan the whole area. And I think that it's a really amazing outcome for Chiltern if it sees its full delivery. I understand that the price tag is quite significant compared to some of the projects that we've delivered previously. And I think some of the concern has been around how we would fund this project. But later on in the agenda, we've seen that there are these buckets of money that are available for projects such as this and that we could apply to. So I'm pleased that it's had good support within the community. I also took on board the feedback from those who had some reservations about it, about putting something such as this in a heritage town. I'd acknowledge that, and I think that our staff have done really well to respond to that feedback and reflect it back to the consultants and ask them to respond to it as well. I think that when we did the Chiltern placemaking project, the vision was a small town with a bold future, or a heritage town with bold future, sorry. And I think that this is just balancing those two components. There are lots of heritage things happening in Chiltern that we maintain and put energy into, but this is also a bold step into the future for Chiltern if we support this tonight. Councillor Shepherd, you reserved your right. Did you wish to speak?
I think that was good summing up. Councillor Price.
Sorry, Councillor Goldsworthy, you wish to speak?
I've always been supportive of there being a destination playground in Chiltern. I think it's ideally located, particularly given its distance from Melbourne. And I just feel that what's being presented towards us is way beyond the scope of what I certainly what I envisaged. And I tend to think that it might even be pie in the sky type stuff. The price tag that's been suggested for this is exorbitant. Yes, there is a federal government grant for growing regions. The chances of success wouldn't be high. I think it'd be very competitive. I think the only way this will get off the ground is if it's staged and council ends up committing a lot of funds to it. I hope it comes off, but I just can't see it.
Councillor Horn, did you wish to speak to the motion? Sorry, Councillor Shepherd, I'll return to you afterwards. I didn't realise I'd left two other councillors without speaking. Councillor Horn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, look, I have great concerns about this. It is an exciting project, it undoubtedly is. But, you know, moving into these difficult financial times, I see as an extravagance that we possibly could put on the back burner. And I agree with Councillor Goldsworthy, the likelihood of it perhaps coming off in these times is unlikely. So, yeah, no, I have serious concerns about it. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, you reserved your right. Would you like to speak?
I think it's great to do big thinking in a council like us. I think we went and had a look at that site, and it's a great site. At the moment, it's quite usable. The community use it, but as I was standing there with this in mind, the vision was amazing. Like what they're planning to put there, what we're planning to put there, the concept around that. I just lifted the whole place. I just could see the vision that there are. And I was impressed that they were able to make me see that with this concept plan. I agree $15 million is a lot of money, but I see further down, we have the opportunity to put it in as for a funding grant. I mean, why would we miss that opportunity? It seems crazy to not have a go with this particular shovel-ready concept, ready to go. And as you've said yourself, Councillor Goldsworthy, it can absolutely be staged. It doesn't need to all be done at once. We can have the play area, we can have the pool area. We've already got the money for the changing places, toilets. So, you know, it absolutely can be staged. I think it's an exciting concept. I love the idea of it. I love the fact that we're going to have something there that's going to be used by the whole of our shire and by people coming off the highway. Like, I think, why not think big if we can get the funding for it, for the different stages? I can't see why we'd say no to this.
Councillor Tyson, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I appreciate some of the commentary that's been put out here tonight. It is a very bold concept, and I understand it's challenging for many people. We've been given an opportunity lower down in our lower down tonight in our agenda to actually support it potentially financially. It is a good project. We got funding for the plan. We could potentially get funding for the project, and it makes sense to do it while the funding is available and not pigeonhole it for another day. I'm all for it, and I hope everybody else is too. Thank you.
I'll put the motion that we adopt the Chiltern Destination Place Space Concept Design Report. All those in favour? Those opposed? So those in favour are Councillor Croucher, Tysell, Gaffney, Price, Goldsworthy, Shepherd, and opposed is Councillor Horn. The motion is carried. Item 12.2 is the Swimming Pools Report 2022-23. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the 2022-23 Swimming Pool Season Report. 2 rescinds the motion from the December 2022 meeting to remove the cold weather policy, and 3 defers to the original contract clause, enabling council officers to develop an appropriate operational process with Belgravia Leisure to manage extreme weather events. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Croucher, seconded Councillor Tysell. Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, the swimming pools in our 5 towns are still very important to the communities who live in them, and also to the surrounding communities. And even I know at Tangam we even get Wodonga schools come out to our pools. Sustainability of these ageing pools I know is always going to be a concern for council. But I'd like to thank the team this year for running our pools so well and for this comprehensive report.
Councillor Tysell, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, I note in the report that we had approximately 27,000 attendees last year, which is considerable. It probably doesn't accurately report how many went to Tangam, as Councillor Croucher would say there's probably 20,000 of those went there. Last year we did have a lot of problems with severe weather conditions, and I didn't feel at the time that we were communicating when our pools would be open and not open to the public. So hence that we had a motion in place. I believe that communication can now be improved, and I support this. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd, you have a question?
I do have a question. I just, I noted that in December, I think it was Councillor Goldsworthy was keen to have a cold weather policy. So, and we're talking about rescinding that. I'm just wondering whether CEO Trevor Areno could just explain to us why that needs to be rescinded.
CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. It's a suggestion as much as anything in that the day-to-day management of our pools often require decisions on the run at short notice based on prevailing weather conditions. I wasn't here at that December moment, but I'm aware that there was an automatic clause in the contract with Belgravia that spoke about, I think it was a 22-degree threshold. Anything below that, pool closed suddenly and it opened suddenly when it was above 22, which, and I acknowledge at that time, would catch people out, and people went to the pool thinking it'd be open when it wasn't. Since that resolution, there were 2 times in the same season where I really had cause to act differently to that policy. There was one day in, I'll say February, where it was a 17-degree day on a Friday. And we were absolutely certain that no one would want to turn up to swim at 17 degrees. But we did make provision for lap swimmers that morning. They are a different breed altogether, and they do like cold weather for some reason. So we provided for lap swimmers, and we closed the pool, which allowed us to have credits up our sleeve with Belgravia. There was another day later in the season, near the closing of the season, where there was a hot spell all of a sudden, and it enabled us to use that time up our sleeve to extend the opening hours beyond what would have been the case. So to have that flexibility at short notice just means we can be more flexible with our service offering. So I support the notion back in December to stop automatically closing or opening at 22. But what I'm proposing here is we have a bit more discretion, use common sense, and make some decisions on the run in consultation with Belgravia. If we really feel like it's an extremely cold day, then let's keep the pool closed and save our biscuits for another day when we can open for longer hours when it's a hot day. And so that's the recommendation there. We wouldn't make changes lightly. We would communicate well in advance, and we would just try and service the needs of the community on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. I'm also, so if we're going to be more flexible and more agile, I suppose, how's our communication going to be flexible and agile? I'm just probably asking that of you, would it be?
Director of Community and Economic Development, Sally Rice. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. We would do our best to anticipate any closure or change to opening hours, looking at the long range forecast, and then work really actively on social media and with the membership card holders to communicate as well as at the venues in the days preceding any change to opening hours. So we would do everything we possibly can to get the message out, but as the CEO mentioned, we would be doing it on days that are less appealing for users in any event, or in days where it's hot and people would be looking to the website for information about opening hours of the pools during a hot spell.
Councillor Shepherd, those were questions. Did you want to comment as well, or is that's enough? Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Goldsworthy.
So last year when we spoke about the removal of that cold weather policy, it was because of the continued closure of our pools and the concern that brought in the community. Some of that was around early morning swimming because as it's been spoken about, most early morning swimmers will get out there in very cold weather and have a swim. And so I'm glad that's being taken into account. The other thing that I'd request is considered is if there are any bookings and you're going to close the pool of an afternoon session, those people that would have a booking should be considered. You know, if they have a kids party on, we close the pool, just be aware that they might be happy using the facilities and not necessarily swimming a lot. So there are other considerations, but I'd like to think that we can apply common sense. Those words will probably bite me, but with the incoming season. Good luck with it.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll return to Councillor Croucher. Would you like to sum up? No? I'll put the motion for the swimming pools report for 2022-23. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.3 is the revocation of the Burke Museum Beechworth Collection Policy 2015. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes the revised Burke Museum Collection Policy 2022. 2, accepts the Burke Museum Collection Policy 2022 will be approved as a CEO directive. 3, endorses the revocation of the Burke Museum Beechworth Collection Policy 2015. And 4, notes that Council will receive an annual briefing detailing the outcome of the annual audit and/or 4-year revaluation reports associated with the Amaga accreditation, plus the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee's response to those audit revaluation reports. Do I have somebody who would like to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Shepherd.
So this Burke Museum collection policy has been updated and it's very technical. It's something that is in line with the MAGA accreditation, Australian Museums and Galleries Association. And they have said that this the policy is a model document and it has become a template for other organisations managing similar collections. So obviously, Ashley Giffney and her staff and also the Cultural Heritage Committee and the Amaga people have helped establish this particular collections policy. I think we read it and it's interesting, and I do agree we need to yearly have a look at that policy and see and get a report from whoever is the manager. At the moment, it's Ashley, and she needs to speak to that collection policy. But in terms of us having an input into that policy, into a highly technical and very much from their perspective, something that we shouldn't as amateurs be playing in perhaps. I think it's good that we hand that over to the CEO as a CEO policy, and that we every year have a look and evaluate that when a report comes. So I think this is a sensible way of approaching the collections policy.
Councillor Goldsworthy, would you like to speak as seconder?
Kudos to Ashley, and well done to the Cultural Heritage Advisory Committee for the advice that they provided through the development of their policy.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gaffney.
I don't recall any policy coming to council from the Burke Museum over the past 8 years. I wonder, will the other Athenaeums come under CEO direction, or will they be guided by their community? I'm not sure what this policy seeks to achieve. I've heard what Councillor Shepherd had to say. I think it lacks community accountability, and that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's interesting that we get an annual briefing detailing the outcome of the annual audit and/or 4-year revaluation report.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'll just make the comments that I think this is the rub as we as we try to professionalise our Burke Museum and/or any of our other Athenaeums or historical societies, that we have to keep in mind the balance of community involvement while also following the very clear instruction and guidance from authorities such as Amaga in terms of protecting our collection and best presenting it. So I hear your concerns, Councillor Gaffney, about managing the community expectation for the Burke Museum, and I know that the Friends of the Burke Museum are keenly interested in what happens at that site, but I also see it as a great indication of how that space is working when this is seen as a model document. So yeah, I think it's just worth noting that as we move these sites from sort of community focused to more professional sites that still remain their community focused, there will always be that rub. Councillor, if nobody else would like to speak, Councillor Horn.
I would be interested in getting an answer to Councillor Gaffney's questions.
What question was that?
In relation to whether the Athenaeums, et cetera, will be included in this.
Can I just check that's not proposed under this policy? This is dealing specifically with the Burke Museum. Okay. Any other question, Councillor Horn?
You
Point of
had
order,
2 or 3
Madam
points,
Mayor.
didn't you?
I thought that the manager of the Burke was also took responsibility for the Athenaeums. That was part of the remit of Cameron at Orty. And he did become involved, and I have asked the question, I wonder, will the other Athenaeums come under CEO directive? Or will they be guided by their community? I certainly asked the question.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Gaffney. So I'll ask that question to the CEO, whether the other Athenaeums now come under CEO directive. CEO.
So I'm just going to have to look over at Sally there to see if she can help me here. I mean, what's before us is the previous Burke Museum collection policy to be rescinded. And to note the revised one, again, titled the Burke Museum collection policy. So my answer here is we're not discussing the other Athenaeums, we're discussing the Burke Museum policy. However, I don't have the policy memorised in my head, whether there's any words in the scope that talk about the coverage of other museums. Don't have that at hand. But I believe it's just this is the Burke Museum policy.
Director of Community and Economic Development, Sally Rice.
Thank you. I'm just reading from the scope. This collection policy provides the strategic direction for all collecting activities undertaken in the Burke Museum. The policy also extends to the buildings and sub-collections of the Beechworth Historic Precinct in an unofficial capacity until the precinct is under the same accreditation, which will be finalised in 2028.
Thank you. Councillor Horn, did you want to make any further comments to the motion?
I think because of the value of volunteers within our communities, you know, we've got some very passionate people. Yeah, so I think that it's important to have that clarification of that point at some stage, please.
The point that was just clarified?
Covering the Burke Museum,
Yes.
but in the fullness of time, we can have some indication perhaps of whether it will affect the other Athenaeums.
So, but tonight you're clear
Yes,
with the
tonight
understanding that this is
tonight I'm
specifically
fine.
about the Burke Museum.
Yes, yes, I understand that.
Great. Okay. Councillor Shepherd, I'll return to you as the mover.
Yes. So can I just read out very quickly the headings for this particular collections policy? There's a access, collection scope, acquisition documentation, cataloguing, legal requirements, collection care, loans, oral history, accession, review and communication, and definitions. So quite a technical document. And in terms of the other smaller historical collections, when we did a tour of those particular places with the Cultural Heritage Committee, Advisory Committee, they were very much of the opinion that even those smaller Athenaeums and Stanley needed a collections policy. And I think Stanley has got quite a good collections policy. So that they're a different accreditation level, of course, but they were advised and encouraged to have a collections policy so that they knew why they were collecting things and what they were going to do with them and how they were going to care for them. So, but again, a different accreditation.
I'll put the motion now for the revocation of Burke Museum Beechworth Collection Policy 2015. All those in favour? Those against? So those in favour were Councillor Croucher, Tysell, Price, Goldsworthy, Shepherd, Horn. Against Councillor Gaffney. The motion is carried. Item 12.4 is the Reconciliation Action Plan Progress Report. The item is for decision. It reads that Council 1 receives this report noting Indigo Shire Council's Reconciliation Action Plan progress. 2 endorses the attached updated RAP action plan with 6-month extension to some actions, and 3, adopts the attached terms of reference for the RAP working group. To have somebody to move that motion. Moved councillor Goldsworthy, seconded councillor Tyson. Councillor Goldsworthy.
The development of the reconciliation action plan, it's a move by council to help integrate the First Nations persons into our society even further. It's a recognition of the place that they hold. The plan itself has been in large part delivered. So council has achieved an 85% success rate against actions, with only 13% of actions yet to be commenced. And that's part of the motion, just acknowledging that those actions haven't been commenced, and to give a further 6 months to start on those, and to adopt the terms of reference. We're slowly moving forward towards that reconciliation. Of course, we've got the referendum for recognition of First Nations people coming up as well. And that too, I hope, will be a success to help us all in accepting what's happened in the past and moving towards a brighter future.
Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, thank you. This plan's in its infancy, and what I'd like to make mention of is that we're one of the few councils in this area that has actually even started a RAP. So congratulations to our staff for it, and to those councillors who endorsed it. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I think for this last year, basically the officers have been working with relationship building and talking, emailing, ringing, trying to find out who's out there, who'd like to work with us. And there's a list in this report of the people they've spoken to. And the other area that's been, I think, a fair bit of work that's been done on internal organisational cultural awareness training. So I think bringing the officers, staff, and eventually the councillors too, to be aware of culturally what's around us, and work with our local Indigenous community, as well as being aware of the overall Australian cultural significance. So I look forward to us having the opportunity to have that cultural awareness training.
I'll just make the comment that I have a level of frustration with this RAP, but I think that it's a good level of frustration because I want more, and I want more involvement from councillors at a strategic level. And when Councillor Tyson references the fact that we are one of the few councils in this area to have even embarked on this process, I think that is to be commended. I appreciate the work that the staff are doing. And I think that I probably reflect the appetite of other councillors in saying that we want to move faster along this journey, but understand that we need to understand and really appreciate the sensitivities involved with us being in this space. So my challenge is to continue to involve us at a strategic level while the officers continue to do good work within the organisation and out in the community as well. So thank you. Any other comments from councillors? If not, I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Goldsworthy, to sum up.
I just acknowledge that it isn't an easy area for council to work in, just because there, I want to understand, at least 4 distinct groups of Aboriginal heritage people that have some form of claim of ownership for areas in the Indigo Shire. And so it does make it difficult, but I know that the staff are working as best they can in that area. And from a personal perspective, vote yes for the referendum.
I'll put it to the vote now for the Reconciliation Action Plan Progress Report. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.5 is the Get Active Indigo Grants 2023. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council allocates $30,000 under the 2022-23 Indigo Shire Get Active Indigo Grants program as follows. There are quite a number of grants listed there below. I won't read them out, and I'll ask someone to move that motion. Councillor Tyson will move and Councillor Croucher would second. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be on the committee that was involved in sorting through the grants and giving out some of the monies that were involved here. I'd like to note that the $30,000 actually achieved $69,000 worth of outcomes for the communities. We have a very diverse section of activities. I'll say activities rather than sports. We've got guided nature walks, line dancing, coaching. We've got swimming, cycle riding, golf, tennis. And we've got multiple things going across most of our communities. And I believe that this is actually one of the better projects that I get to be involved in as part of a councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Croucher, would you like to speak as seconder?
This is just another opportunity for local groups and organisations to access funds to assist with the health and well-being of our communities. It's just great to see funds spread to a variety of different organisations and to all parts of the Shire.
I'd just like to say that I'm really pleased that we've got a really robust process in place and that we can have a councillor reflect back just how satisfied they were with that process as we consider it at the council meeting. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll return to Councillor Tyson as the mover if you'd like to sum up.
In summary, the activities here aren't all engaging young people, they're engaging all age people across all activities. And it's not very often that we get to be so inclusive in handing out their acts. Thank you.
I'll put the motion to accept these grants. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12.6 is the Federal Government Growing Regions Program Grant Fund Recommendations. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 supports a Tourism Northeast application for Indigo Shire's Rutherglen Silo Precinct and Community Arts Hub project in the Federal Government Growing Regions Program Funding Round 23-24, noting the required 90-10 cash contribution as per the eligibility criteria if successful by submitting an expression of interest, and 2, pending feedback on the expression of interest referred to in point 1 above, proceed with making a full application, and 3, endorses a council application for the Chiltern Destination Play Space project in the Federal Government Growing Regions Program Funding Round 23-24, noting the 90-10 cash contribution as per the eligibility criteria if successful by submitting an expression of interest, and 4, pending feedback on the expression of interest referred to in point 3 above, proceed with making a full application. Do I have somebody who would like to move that? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Tyson.
There have been quite a few shortlisted for this. I think this highlights why we have to future plan for our communities. You're never quite sure when funding can come through, and you need to be shovel ready. I believe that the 2 projects that have been highlighted here are shovel ready and have a reasonable chance of being successful, and will future-proof the communities that they're involved with and the communities around them with Indigo Shire.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder? Your reserve your right. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher.
I just love the conclusion of this report because it really spells it out very well. I thought talks about the Rutherglen Silo Precinct and the Community Arts Hub and Chiltern Destination Playground projects are perfectly aligned to this grant fund and readily positioned for the funding round opening in July 2023. And you just never know.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gaffney. You need your microphone on, councillor.
These are part of the Federal Government Growing Regions Fund. Grants can be applied for from 500,000 to 15 million. We're in for 2 grants. One's for 12.5 million, and the other one is the Chiltern Play Space, which is 15 million, of which we only have to contribute 10%, which is 1.5 million. that we would be able to borrow. We wouldn't be borrowing that until next year's budget, you would think. So if I was a gambling man, the opportunity to get 15 million for 1.5 would be a good bet.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to say that I think it shows real leadership to see potential in these projects, because our capacity to fund them ourselves is non-existent. Nevertheless, we've backed our staff with bringing forward these projects that are really bold and are aspirational for our communities into the future. In terms of the grant funding, the 90-10 contribution, I just think is incredible for us that we could not pass that up. We're so heavily reliant on grant funding. And in attending recently the Australian Council for Local Governments, we heard directly from Minister King, who's the Minister for Infrastructure, as well as many other things, who was very clear with all of the people in the room that they are really hanging their hat on the robustness of their grant processes. And so if our staff deem these projects to be eligible and meet the criteria, and if the government holds firm on their promise to really keep these grant processes robust, then I think that we've got two really great projects to put forward. So as Councillor Gaffney said, why wouldn't we? So I'm very excited to put those forward. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Shepherd, who reserved her right. Councillor Tyson, would you like to sum up?
In hindsight, in summary, I'd just like to go back to the engagement outcomes. Both of these projects have been heavily community supported, and I hope that the community get the reward for these efforts. Thank you.
I'll put the motion for the Federal Government Growing Regions Program Grant Fund recommendations. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, so all those in favour are Councillor Croucher, Tysell, Gaffney, Price, Shepherd, Horn, and Councillor Goldsworthy, sorry, you abstain from the vote. The vote is carried.
Just a question, Madam Mayor. Do you have to give a reason why you abstain? Used to be.
Reading from the governance rules, if a councillor abstains from a vote, the chairperson may ask the councillor to clearly indicate to the chair that they are abstaining and explain to the council meeting why they are abstaining from the vote. But B, a councillor is not obliged to provide any explanation to the chairperson when asked so under Rule 63A. Councillor Goldsworthy, would you like to explain why you would abstain from the vote today?
These are not the projects I was looking for.
So the vote is carried. We'll move on to item 13.1, the May Capital Works Report. The item is for information. The recommendation is that council notes the May Capital Works Report and year-to-date progress in the delivery of the Capital Works program. I have somebody to move that motion. Moved Councillor Croucher, seconded Councillor Tysell. Councillor Croucher, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, despite the shortage of delivery resources in key constructive months, impacting on overall delivery of the projects, the outcome, both capital and non-Indigo Shire Council programs, remains on track, and that is important.
Thank you, Councillor Croucher. Councillor Tysell, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, look, once again, we've been challenged by a fair bit of bad weather in delivering some of our infrastructure projects, but things are on course and will be completed hopefully in the near future.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gaffney?
A question for the mover. I think it's on page 5. Under Beechworth to Yackandandah Rail Trail. The bottom of the page, it said subtitle and overall budget line, rail trail at $7.1 million. Have you got it there?
The question might be more
I think it
appropriately
would be more appropriate for our.
directed to the Director of
Services.
Infrastructure.
You seemed to cross it. There it is there.
I think
So,
I'll pass that on because I.
thank you, Councillor
I'm not the
Croucher.
Director of
So,
Infrastructure
Councillor
and Services.
Gaffney, you can outline your question to the Director of Infrastructure.
You should
Services.
ask him.
So, under the multi-year projects from previous income from June 30, 2021 to income to date, it talks about 5.18 billion, which I believe would be the grant funding from the state government for this project. The current previous expenditure total and the total expenditure to date, there's a difference of 117,251. Will that be ratepayers' money and will that be spent on the rail trail in this financial year?
Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
So thanks for the question. I think you're referring to the expenditure. You have me looking at the income line. Look, there seems to be an error in the way the columns are calculated for the total expenditure. The blue column or the total expenditure over the life of the project should be an addition of the previous year's expenditure, which totals 5.734 million, and the expenditure across this year. And that looks to be incorrectly added. We can see 4 numbers there in the third column, $147,029, $100.95. So look, the total expenditure to date should be a little bit higher than that 5.8 million. But I think your question was about where that would be funded from. All of that money is included in the budget. There's no sort of overruns or anything further to, I suppose the allocations that have previously been made to this project, most recently at the mid-year budget review in February.
And one other question, do we have a date when that rail trail might open?
No, look, it is, we're really challenged by the weather at the moment. So we're building the final section 7 down Kibble Lane out of Beechworth. We do have contractors on site, but we'll need to get through the wetter period and get some dry weather to sort of get the seal on that and the final works. But look, later this year, we're into June now, so looking into the spring, potentially even early summer.
It might be quicker because we're moving into an El Nino when it stops raining.
Maybe.
Okay, so would anybody else like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Croucher as the mover.
Oh, thank Councillor Gaffney for his question, which was so well read out by our Director of Infrastructure, Ian Ellett. Look, the last thing, I generally look to the bottom line, and it even says here that the capital and non-IC programs remain on track to even exceed expenditure levels in prior years.
Thank you, Councillor Croucher. I'll put the motion for the May Capital Works report. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.1 is the Council Expense and Resources Policy. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses the draft Council Expense and Resources Policy and 2 places it on public exhibition for a period of 30 days and invites submissions. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Gaffney. Councillor Shepherd.
The Chief Municipal Inspector, this is a comment from him. Councillor expenses and claims for reimbursement often attract public attention. It does. People like to know what we're getting for free. Hardly for free, is it? We're working very hard, but it looks like we are working very hard for it. Because councils are publicly funded, their systems for managing expenditure are subject to particular scrutiny. The integrity and transparency of those systems are critical for maintaining public confidence in the important work of local government. So this is a review of that policy that we did in 2020, and it's really looks more transparently at a number of items which are provided to councillors as a matter of course, such as newspaper subscriptions are included. I don't think that was in there before. The changes to the way the council allowances are determined, regular resources which are provided to councillors but are not currently outlined in the policy. I'm assuming that means our laptops, and reflections on the Act and advice from the local government inspectorate. So they're all there for the community to see what we're getting, not for free because we're working very hard. For 30 days, the community is asked to have a look at that policy and give us feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Gaffney, would you like to speak as seconder?
Just that any expenses that are applied for are checked, double checked and triple checked.
Would anybody else like to speak to the council expense and resources policy? I'd just like to say there's a particular addition that I'm very pleased to see, and that's the professional and legal advice, which provides a mechanism for councillors to seek external advice to assist in carrying out their roles. I've identified that along the way in my time on council, and I'm pleased to see that that's included. And I would also reflect that it's a very high bar in terms of the transparency that councillors have to provide if they are to utilise or claim any expense or resource within council. I think this policy adequately reflects that. If nobody else would like to speak to that, I'd go back to Councillor Shepherd if you'd like to sum up, or you're all done. Okay, we'll put it to the vote on the council expense and resources policy. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.2 is the advisory committee minutes. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the attached unconfirmed meeting minutes for the following advisory committees and endorses the officer recommendations: A, Indigo Environment Advisory Committee, and B, Indigo Community Access Committee. 2, adopts the updated terms of reference for the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee. Do I have someone to move that motion? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Croucher. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak? Councillor Croucher, nothing. If no one else would like to speak, Councillor Shepherd would.
Yeah, there's 2 recommendations, one from the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee and one from the Indigo Community Access Advisory Committee. And I think both of them are worth noting. So the one from the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee is to change the terms of reference to allow other council staff to be invited to be on that committee if they would like to, or if the committee thinks that would be useful. And then in relation to the Chiltern Place space concept design, the Access Committee has requested the creators of the concept reconsider including a Liberty Swing. And I note that the Ageing Well Officer supports the consideration of Liberty Swing in the design concept for the Chiltern Destination Playground, and this change has been made to the concept design at agenda item 12.1. So thank those 2 advisory committees for their input.
If nobody else would like to speak to the motion, I'll put it. So I'll put the vote for the advisory committee minutes. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.3 is the informal meetings of councillor records. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillor records, moved by Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Gaffney, do you wish to speak? No. Councillor Croucher, you don't wish to speak either. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.4 is contracts awarded under CEO delegation for May 2023. It's for information, but there were no contracts awarded by the CEO under the delegation between the values of $250,000 and $500,000 for the month of May 2023. Councillors, as I alluded to earlier in the agenda and as we pass, we'll now enter the late item of business at this point. Councillor Goldsworthy, I'll get you to read out your motion.
So the motion is that council adopts the following statements in unequivocal commitment to diversity, inclusion and the rights of LGBTIQA+ communities across the Indigo Shire. The council advocates for a strong strategic commitment to supporting the LGBTIQA+ community.
Councillor Goldsworthy, would you like to speak? Sorry, can we get a seconder for that motion? Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
The Indigo Shire Council is unequivocal in our firm commitment to diversity, inclusion and the rights of the LGBTIQ+ communities across the Indigo Shire. Council strongly believes our Shire is healthier, happier, safer and a better place to live when our residents feel a strong sense of belonging and the ability to express their identity freely without fear of discrimination. The actions and behaviour of those who intend to exclude, intimidate and marginalise others have no place in our society and will not be tolerated by this council. Council will not reduce our commitment to advocate for and elevate the voices of the LGBTIQ+ residents. Indigo Shire Council is proud to stand with our LGBTIQI+ community, and we will continue to show our support to ensure our residents of all ages feel safe, welcome and loved regardless of gender or sexual orientation. Indigo Shire Council is a proud signatory of the NEPC MOU. Council advocates for our regional neighbouring councils to collaborate to demonstrate a shared strategic interest in the essential work for the LGBTIQ+ residents. From a personal perspective, I was very disappointed to see the cancellation of the Rainbow Ball, and I believe it showed a lack of intestinal fortitude on behalf of a neighbouring council in cancelling that event. And I believe that if it is not held within a short period of time, we should look to hold it ourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak?
I was also very disappointed and as a matter of fact, I was shocked and saddened really. And I do think we need to put out a statement of support. I was worried about those young people on that weekend and what they would be thinking. And we didn't really, I mean, this is our opportunity to say how we feel as a council, and I very much strongly support these words. I do want these words to be put out there for people to see that we are a very supportive and inclusive community. And I agree, we need to ensure that the Rainbow Ball and such events as our MOU with those shires stipulate, I suppose, that we do move forward in this space and continue to support and encourage and create opportunities for the LGBTQIA+ community to get together.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Gaffney, did you want to give any insight into when the ball first started? Can I invite you to comment on that?
Sure. I was fortunate to be mayor in 2018 when the first Rainbow Ball was held. I think it might have been in the state of Victoria and certainly in a regional centre. It was very well received. There was so many young people there. Parents were there dropping off their children and some staying. It was just an amazing event, and they were so happy when it was announced that there would be one the year after. I'm not sure whether there was, but it was very successful, and it gave me a really good feeling.
Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Horn.
I'd like to ask a question, please. The concerns about security is not necessarily related to our local people. Am I right in thinking that?
What do you mean?
The activities of people, you know, like who are against LGBT people. You know, I don't think it's our local communities that are causing this great concern. I think it's more centred in Melbourne. Am I right in believing that?
So you'd be talking about the far right extremist groups that are closing down some of these events?
Yes.
Thus far, we've seen them predominantly quite active in cities, but as is evidenced by the fact that this ball had to be postponed, some of that activity is spreading out into the region and into our rural areas. I would agree with you, and I think it's a really proud statement for us to say that it's not anywhere near a big quantity of people within our communities, and overwhelmingly, I think our communities are supportive and inclusive. Nonetheless, the impacts of having to postpone or cancel any of these events for this group is really detrimental, and so I think that it's a really great show of leadership for us to be able to stand here and make this statement tonight. Do you have any other comments to make to the motion, Councillor Horn?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak? I'd like to say I'm really proud of the leadership that we've shown in this space to date. I'm really proud that Councillor Gaffney was the mayor of the time who attended the Rainbow Ball when it first kicked off, because it didn't have the support of all of the neighbouring councils, and nonetheless we showed leadership in that space. Sometimes it takes someone as a real catalyst to drive that activity, and we were so fortunate to have the combination of leadership from council and a fantastic youth worker in Sal Kimber at the time to really get that going. It was a youth-led initiative that was facilitated by youth workers, and they really felt ownership over it. And it was really great to see that there was then a commitment from councils in the region to continue to host it. We would share the hosting responsibilities. Now that operates at an officer level with the North East Pride Network, who collaborate fortnightly for an hour and a half about the different calendar of events that they're able to provide across the region, the Rainbow Ball just being one in a number of events that we're able to provide for these communities. The Rainbow Ball is still one of the signature events, and I think as much as it will be shared around the region and hosted by different councils, we will always feel a real ownership over that event. So when the announcement was made by Wangaratta Council that it was to be postponed, each of the councillors and staff that I spoke to were deeply disappointed in that decision, and really reflecting on our role and how we maintain really strong leadership in that space. We've been aware of the potential for these far-right groups to shut such events down, and I think it's really incumbent upon us to do all of the appropriate planning to make sure that these events can go ahead in a safe way. I know that our staff are continuing to do that work, but as we sort of dealt with the fallout from that event being postponed, it was really clear that we needed a really strong show of leadership from our council to really commit to celebrating this group of people in our community. We had hosted a very successful Dragged Out festival, so of course we need to get in behind that. I'm really proud that we're going to do that, and I think that the Rainbow Ball should continue in this form for many years to come. I'd also just note that for the first time this year, all 79 councils celebrated Ida Hobbit Day and raised the Ida Hobbit flag. And that was through the good work of the Rainbow Local Government Group and the Victorian Pride Lobby that all 79 councils were able to recognise the International Day against homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. So it's a message to our communities, it's a message to these groups, it's a message to our staff to keep doing the good work in this space, and we back you with our leadership in that area. So I will go back to Councillor Goldsworthy as the mover, if there's anything you'd like to say in summing up.
Nothing further apart from stay strong.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. So I'll put the motion, I'll read it once again, that Council adopts the following statement in unequivocal commitment to diversity, inclusion and the right of LGBTIQA+ communities across Indigo Shire Council, and that Council advocates for a strong strategic commitment to supporting LGBTIQA+ communities. All those in favour? Very proud to say that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now move to item 15.1, 8.1, which is a notice of motion, report on CCTV. Councillor Gaffney, I'll get you to read your motion.
The motion is that council requests the CEO to meet with Victoria Police Local Area Command and providers of high definition CCTV and provide a report to council on the viability of council purchasing CCTVs for the safety of our communities across Indigo Shire.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Tyson. Back to you, Councillor Gaffney. Would you like to speak?
There has been overwhelming support from right across the Shire from people supporting this proposal. This initiative of council would assist in preventing crime and apprehending offenders, including offences of burglary, theft, breach of intervention orders, stalking and harassment, domestic violence and abuse. Criminal incidents in Indigo Shire have increased by 18.9% in the 12 months to March this year. Offenders are often identified by clothing they wear, tattoos, and even their gait, not necessarily facial recognition. Whilst investigating serious crime, investigators are always calling for any person with CCTV or dash cam. We have a duty of care to our communities, not only safe, but to feel safe. This motion was supported at the local safety committee meetings, and this motion is supported by the local area command.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, I know there is some general concern in our communities regarding activities of a night time normally, and that this doesn't come with a financial commitment from Shire. This is more around us consulting with senior police and working out a plan going forward.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? A question from Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's for the CEO. The CEO, in May, there was a request made at the end of the meeting that you examine the efficacy of using a fixed or mobile CCTV fitted system. As a minimum, this examination should include different types of CCTV, the storage requirements, the potential locations and placement of CCTV, the cost, the impact on privacy of the public, engage with the Wodonga Police Local Area Command regarding the benefits of any proposed CCTV system. Have you been able to action any of that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, well, some work has commenced on that, Councillor. So we've had our staff have met with local police. Our staff have made some inquiries of another regional city in Victoria that has CCTV to learn the lessons from them. We'll also be contacting some other two other councils across Australia with similar experience to get their feedback. So early stages, Councillor, but yeah, there has been some work started on that.
Are you able to say which council you've contacted in relation to CCTV?
I believe that was Shepparton.
You aware of the volume of crime in Shepparton at the moment?
Not off the top of my head.
I said there was roughly close to 8,000 crimes committed in the Shepparton area in the last 12 months. Would you have any reason to dispute that?
I've got no comment to make on that, Councillor.
Right. If I said there was roughly 290 crimes in the Beechworth area, you got any reason to dispute that?
I've got no comment on that, Councillor.
Right. So in relation to the motion that's before us, do you think that that adds anything to what you've already been requested to examine?
Perhaps not for me to judge. If this motion gets up, I'll have a look at this motion and I'll have a look at the work we've already commenced and would put the two together to make sure that the request in May was satisfied as well as this request, should it be successful, to satisfy both at the same time, Councillor.
Thank you.
I think that's about the limits of what the CEO could make comment on about that. It is a notice of motion and it's before us now. Would any other councillor like to make comment about this notice of motion? No? Yes, Councillor Shepherd.
I note this is probably quite a big thing to be looking at, CCTV across our Shire. and possibly an expensive one. So I have no problem with this motion as such, but I would want to know the cost versus the benefit before we went any, after this report comes to us. I'd certainly want to look at the costing of this compared, as I said, compared to the benefit that we may gain.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Gaffney as the mover.
Just in answer to Councillor Shepherd's question about having CCTV right across the Shire, that's not the purpose of this motion. It's about CCTV being able to be accessed across the Shire. I noticed at the May meeting, you asked the question about how that could be used on farms. I'm not sure why you raised it, and the answer was given that you asked the question to Councillor Tysell. You asked a question, I've viewed the tape. If you want to go back over it, you asked about farms, and Councillor Tysell responded the same as Councillor Goldsworthy on this exact same motion 4 times, urged the councillors not to vote for it. I'm not sure what he's saying about the crime rate in Shepparton, but I remember Shepparton had the highest regional crime rate in Victoria. I'm not sure why he raised that with the CEO. This motion is to request the CEO to meet with the local area command, not be interested in what's happening in Shepparton, but the crime rate in Indigo Shire has gone up 18.9%. That is extraordinary. And this is to assist in the prevention of crime and the apprehension of offenders. It was mentioned in May that they wear hoodies and caps. In today's Border Mail, you'll see an offender with a cap on. You can clearly see who he is. And I urge you to do this. That has the support of the local area command, the local safety committees. I'll rest it with you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Councillor Gaffney's now summed up, so we'll put it to the vote. It's the notice of motion and a report on CCTV. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Goldsworthy, you're not voting for or against the motion? You're abstaining from the vote? So all those in favour is Councillor Croucher, Tysell, Gaffney, Price, Shepherd, Horn. The motion is carried. We'll now move to item 16, which is councillors' reports. In the interest of time, I'm going to kick off with a report about my attending the National General Assembly of Local Governments. I attended the National General Assembly of Local Governments in Canberra with my colleagues, Councillor Gaffney and Croucher and the CEO. On the first day, we attended the regional forum where we heard from Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Christy McBain, and the Shadow Minister, the Honourable Darren Chester, and listened to panels that addressed the issues of local governments increasing their resilience to national disasters, and a panel about the skills shortages in regional and rural Australia. The second and third days were the General Assembly, which had in attendance more than 1,100 people from local governments around Australia, where we received an address from the Honourable Catherine King MP and the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton MP, and listened to panels of excerpts discussing topics from electrifying Australia, led by Saul Griffiths, through to other topics such as building more resilient infrastructure, Australia's affordable housing crisis, and a conversation about communities who have recently experienced cyclones, fires and floods, and their learnings and advice for us. The last part of our time in Canberra was to experience the reconvened Australian Council for Local Governments, which included a dinner for mayors and CEOs in Parliament House on the Thursday night, with almost all of the members of Cabinet, including the Prime Minister, in attendance and available to speak to us, and the event itself on the Friday. Ministers were programmed for the entirety of Friday to discuss and take questions on the different portfolios and where they would like input from local governments for the remainder of the year and this term of government. Each of them emphasised their commitment to local governments and the important role that we play in our communities. To maximise our short time in Canberra, we sought meetings with ministers and MPs in between the various conference sessions to allow time to specifically raise issues for Indigo. We successfully secured meetings with Minister McBain, Minister King, Dr. Helen Haynes MP and Bridget McKenzie, where we were able to strengthen the relationships with these politicians and their officers and raise issues from our advocacy plan as adopted by Council. I make this report to council because I appreciate the importance of highlighting our attendance at these events and the value that these events can provide to our organisation and our wider community as we bring back learnings to be implemented at Indigo Shire Council. Does anybody else have a councillor report? Councillor Gaffney?
On Sunday night, I attended the Beechworth Winter Words event at the Burke Museum. There was a presentation by Richard Patterson, who is the author of 4 books which have been published. The event was put on by the Friends of the Burke. The Friends of the Burke have raised $75,000 for the Burke Museum. Also, last week, I attended the Australian Local Government Association conference in Canberra, attended the regional forum, a presentation by the Minister for Regional Development, Christy McBain, the Shadow Minister for Regional Development, Darren Chester, the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, etc., the Honourable Catherine King, the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton, the Ambassador for Ukraine, a panel on the future for local government. Also met with Senator for Victoria, Bridget McKenzie. We discussed local issues, example, Main Street, Rutherglen, and the Albury-Wodonga Hospital.
Councillor Croucher, you've got a councillor report.
Yes, I also had the opportunity to attend the conference in Canberra. Everything has been said, but I think one of the biggest things for myself was the great opportunity to communicate with councillors and mayors from all over the country. There was one shire there, a mayor I spoke to. She had 312. That was the population of her shire, but it was a very important shire. And these sort of things, just able to discuss incidents and issues within our communities was great for me. Plus that opportunity to speak to ministers to advocate on behalf of our own shire. I suggest other councillors go just for that opportunity of mixing with other councils and councillors as well. It was a great week.
Thank you, Councillor Croucher. Do any other councillors have a councillor report for the June meeting? No, the Mayor's diary is there for information. The decision register is also there. We now move to general business. Does anyone have any general business for the meeting? Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I've got a couple of
We need your microphone, Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I'd like to bring up. There's a development occurring in Reedy Street in Rutherglen, and we've had some inquiries as to whether or not there may be contaminants in the soil, which may lead to contamination of water down the track. So I'd like to sort of seek some sort of security for those residents around that particular development, and whether or not we've done anything to look into that. Perhaps Ian Ellett, you be able to help with that?
Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Yeah, thanks, councillor. Look, certainly aware that there were concerns raised by someone in the community just around some potential contaminants in the soil. It might affect the stormwater flow due to the mining tailings in that area. My understanding is that the manager planning has sought some legal advice just around our process and has followed that up with some other due diligence work where we're sorting through to just try and ascertain the, I suppose, the likelihood of those things being in place. So I haven't got any further outcome or anything at this stage.
Thank you very much. And while I have your attention, the ongoing traffic down Reeds Way and the deteriorating conditions, especially on the verges of the road, just had people approach me and ask whether or not we're going to incur the ongoing costs for that.
Thank you again for the question. No, so the arrangements are Reeds Way, even though there's a current diversion in place that puts arterial traffic on it, we're still managing the roadway. So we being council carry out the necessary maintenance to keep that safe. But we do have an arrangement with Regional Roads Victoria that the road was assessed really right at the start of the diversion period by both parties, and any out of the ordinary maintenance that we've incurred, we would seek to get back from Regional Roads Victoria.
Thank you very much. And I suppose my last one is probably to the CEO. With the $9 charge now to trains, especially to go to Melbourne, there's been quite a considerable uptake of usage in the Chiltern Rail Station. However, the platform signs are on the wrong side directing patrons to the train. So the north-south is actually on the wrong sides of the railway. So to go to Melbourne, you're actually on the opposite side to the train that's leaving Wodonga. And then patrons have to come. Could we perhaps contact V-Line or Victrac or whoever's responsible for that to have that rectified?
Have you taken that on notice, councillor?
Do any other councillors have any general business for the June meeting? No. If that's the case, I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:55 p.m. with the next scheduled meeting to be Tuesday, the 25th of July, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.